right, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Awesome. Well, we are starting a brand new series today called
Never Give Up.
Never Give Up. All right, we're going to be talking about what it means to never give up, which is really important because oftentimes when we meet resistance, the most natural inclination for each of us is to take the path of least resistance. So whenever there's an obstacle, it's easier to take the easier route. That's what we like to do because we don't like pain, and the harder route is uncomfortable, and so we don't like that. And so when tough things happen, how do we never give up? It's the kind of things that we want to be able to have and character that we want to have in our own life. The best example that I think of when I think about this are like athletes that like always push forward, and like, you know, the people who get injured but like still get back up and cross the finish line, you know, or maybe the people who like you didn't think were going to make the team, they almost got cut, but then they end up like scoring the winning points in the game. That's really important. Or maybe my favorite example is in 1997 when my brother was born. It was the day he was born. I was 5 years old almost, and Michael Jordan, the GOAT, right? The real GOAT. He had probably one of his more famous games called the flu game. You guys heard of this? Anybody?
I just heard of the best.
Yeah, if you watch The Last Dance, you know, you'll hear part of this. But Michael Jordan had gotten food poisoning, and he was throwing up, and then he stumbles onto the court and scores 38 points, including the winning basket to put them in the lead, 88-90, and they win the game because of Michael Jordan persevering under the immense pressure, and then he stumbles off the court because he still has food poisoning. So it's pretty incredible. It's when you're faced with obstacles and you fight through and you show something called resilience, and you push through. And actually, take that off the screen real quick. I want to do a quick test. What would you tell me is your definition of resilience if you didn't see that or if you weren't here first hour? Your definition of resilience. Say that louder. You don't know what that means. Okay. So, what would you say? Being strong, that's good. What else?
Never giving up.
Never giving up. Even, no matter the circumstances, yeah? Okay, Jonathan. I'll come back to you because you were here last hour. Say that louder. Moving forward no matter what pain you're in. That's good. All right, Jonathan. Bounce back. That's very good. It's almost like you've been here before. All right. So the definition that we'll use is bouncing back and growing stronger after you have struggled, failed, or faced hard stuff in your life. This is what it means to be resilient. It doesn't mean you're never going to face obstacles. In fact, it means you're going to face obstacles, but the way you respond to them is with resilience. That you're able to bounce back and keep growing. In fact, the struggle almost makes you stronger. You are able to bounce back even maybe when you have failed, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about resilience. Now, if I can be honest, this is something that I wish I had a little bit more of, right? There's often times where we encounter failures or obstacles. Like, how many of you feel like you can never master your favorite video game? Because sometimes there's challenges. Like when I was growing up, there's like cheat codes. Do you guys still, is cheat codes still a thing in some games? Like I would have to get the cheat code in order to win, or maybe you have to look it up on YouTube to figure out how somebody does it, and then you can then do it yourself. But sometimes we just can't master our favorite video game by ourselves. We need some help. Maybe you can't seem to grasp that math concept or grammar or science, right? Or maybe it's something else. Maybe you just have a hard time finding a friend, or maybe you've had your heart broken, or maybe you tried out and you didn't make the cut, or maybe you had parents that decided they didn't love each other anymore. Maybe you've experienced death or disease of someone that you love. And you know what? That's incredibly difficult. We all face hard things in life. Some of us harder than others, and some of us at different times than others. But that's a hard reality, that we're going to face hard times. So how do we have the kind of resilience that makes it so that we never give up? Because those are big deals. Those things are tough. They hurt. They cause pain. They cause discomfort. So we should probably know how to have resilience when it comes to those things. How many of you want to be known as the person who gave up at the first sign of trouble? Right? Nobody. Nobody wants to be that person. Everybody wants to be Michael Jordan when you have food poisoning. You want to be able to push forward and to still win even when things are tough, even when you have obstacles. I like to do, my wife and I, we like to do house projects a lot where we do stuff around the house. I like to think of myself as a handyman, but I'm not. Let's be honest, I'm a YouTube expert. I will watch videos and then try to mimic it right afterwards on my house and use my house as a test subject. Sometimes it works out great and it looks good and I'm like, yeah, I did that. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes it looks good for a day or two and then it falls apart and I'm like, whoops, I didn't do that right. Like sometimes it's beyond my purview and I hit a roadblock that no amount of YouTube is going to teach me to fix this because I literally can't do that, right? If it involves me going into a crawl space, it won't happen. So there's certain obstacles that you got to call in a professional. You got to call in somebody. You need help. You can't do it by yourself. And that's kind of the point sometimes. When you hit roadblocks, you're not meant to go through it alone. And so one of the best ways to have resilience and to never give up is to know that you have people in your corner that care about you, that are with you. Maybe you felt defeated or worn out or unsure how to handle a certain situation. And the bad news is we all are going to face hard times. Right? We're all going to have obstacles. That's the bad news. The good news is that God is with us. God never actually intended for it to be like this. Right? Back in the beginning in Genesis when they were in the garden and there was before sin, this was how it was meant to be. There was no pain. There was no suffering. It was all good as God had said. But then when sin entered the world, when we chose our own way, and you and I choose our own way a lot, that sin distorts the world, it distorts reality, it makes things not great sometimes. And so because of that, as a result, we're going to face hard times. But the good news is it was never meant to be like that. It's not always going to be like that, right? And also, you're never alone in that pain. You're never alone in those hard times. God promises that He's always going to be with us, and He's given us His church, the people around us, to be with us when we can't do it alone. So the perfect example of this is from the guy that we read from almost every week, Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament. Right? He goes around and he's planting churches. He's writing letters to churches. Those letters are documented in what we now call the New Testament in our Bible. And so Paul, you'd think he's this super Christian that like nothing could face him, that he wouldn't have to go through hard things because he's accomplishing so much. But the opposite is actually true. Paul goes through so many things that you and I will never have to go through. It's pretty insane. And so in his letter to the church in Corinth, he writes this in order to encourage them. But hold on to your seats because this is kind of nuts. He says, I have been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, and faced death again and again. 5 different times the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. They believed 40 would kill you, so you do 40 minus 1. There's a 39 lashes. It was pretty painful. There were times that I was beaten with rods. 3 times, I said. Once I was stoned, meaning like they would drag you out of town or drag you into town and just find a pit somewhere, or they would just pelt rocks at you until you died and stopped moving, right? He was stoned. Funny story there we'll come back to. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea, which to me is pretty terrifying. Don't like that idea. I have traveled on many long journeys. I've faced danger from rivers and from robbers. I've faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I faced danger in the cities, in the deserts, and on the seas. I faced danger from men who claim to be believers, but are not. I have worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I've been hungry and thirsty, and have often gone without food. I've shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. Holy cow. You read all that and you're like, that dude had a lot of bad luck, right? But he's in his message here, he's not once saying like, so you know what, sometimes there's a time to give up, right? No, he's saying just the opposite. You know what? I know my calling. I know what God has called me to. I know the truth. I know that He's with me. I know that He loves me. I know that He works all things for His good and for my good. So I'm going to keep going. Despite what may come your way, it doesn't mean that God is absent. It doesn't mean that He's not there. It doesn't mean that He doesn't care. In fact, God shows up on His behalf time and time again, despite the obstacles. In fact, the obstacles are almost the chance for God's strength to shine through in the midst of your weaknesses. And so that time where Paul was stoned, like they know when you're dead, right? So most scholars think that he was dead. He didn't just pass out or faint or whatever. He was lifeless. They threw him out of the city to rot, and God breathed life back into him, and he gets back up and he walks back into the city, which is nuts. It's like, hey, yeah, you just tried to kill me. God has other plans. And he continued to preach. Like, you go read it. It's pretty insane. But, like, God intercedes on our behalf. Sometimes it's not as cool as that. Sometimes it's not literally like raising us from the dead. But he reveals himself in awesome and powerful ways. And things happen that wouldn't have otherwise happened had you not had to go through the suffering. See, we shrink back from pain and suffering because it's uncomfortable. And it's human nature. But if we allow God to do something with it, it can completely change the story. Not only for your life, but for those around you. And actually, your faith will grow deeper. So if anybody had any authority to talk about the hard things in life, it was Paul. And that's what he had to say. In fact, in his letter to the church in Philippi, he says this. He says, "No, dear brothers and sisters, I've not achieved it," meaning I've not fully known Jesus, because still in this life, I've not fully achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. See, Paul knew something that we talk about all the time, which is knowing Jesus changes everything. And what he knew was that I can either focus on all the bad things that are happening to me and get discouraged and give up, or I can keep pressing forward to what I know God has called me to. Because I know Jesus, and that changes everything. It changes my relationships. It changes my perspective. It changes my mission and my calling in life. And Paul knew these things. And so he's encouraging the church in Corinth, despite what's going on, despite the suffering that you're facing, believe me, I know because I've suffered, God is still working. He's doing incredible things. And now is not the time to give up. Forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. This is what he's talking about. We talk about our definition of resilience means bouncing back from obstacles or failures or anything like that. It's kind of like when you're bouncing a ball and it's going one direction, gravity and my strength is making it go downwards, but then it hits the obstacle and it bounces back. See, if we don't have resilience, it's like as if the ball were flat and it just like doesn't come all the way back up. That's what a lack of resilience is. And then you stall, then you fall, and then you're done. But when you have resilience, it's like you're puffed up, you're full, and you're able to bounce back when you meet resistance. And you want to be able to have that kind of resilience in your life. You want to be able to have the resilience that can withstand the obstacles. See, scientists have studied this, and they have determined that it takes approximately 0.0001 seconds for the momentum of this ball to change and do a complete 180. From the time that it was going straight down to when it bounces back up and changes direction, that little millisecond when it hits the ground is like 0.0001 seconds. That's the kind of resilience you want. That as soon as you meet resistance, you're able to bounce back. Now, sometimes, we know this, we don't bounce back quite that quickly. But those are the kinds of things that build the resilience in our lives. And the more we trust God with our lives, the more that we have faith, and we use the tools that He's given us to build that resilience, the better and the more quickly and the more growth we will have, the more that we will be able to bounce back when tough times happen. Because they will happen. Remember, that was the bad news from earlier. But it's not all the news. There is good news. And there's a way to move forward. And when you feel like maybe you have nowhere else to go, when you feel like maybe the obstacles in your life are taking you out, taking out your future, taking out your opportunities, taking out your relationships, God always makes a way. He's not left us without tools. He's not left us without a path to move forward. And He has not left us alone, because He is with us through His Spirit and working in our lives. So resilience helps us to never give up. It helps us to never look at defeat and call it quits. In fact, when Jesus was talking about this very issue, when He was talking about what it's going to be like for us in life. He reminds us of kind of the bad news we talked about earlier. He goes, I've told you these things because you will face trouble in this world. That's what he says right before this verse. He says, in this world you'll face trouble many times. He goes, I've told you these things so that in me you may have what? Peace. He doesn't say, in me you will have understanding, right? Because some terrible things are beyond understanding. Some terrible things that we experience in life, we'll never understand. He doesn't promise understanding. He promises peace. A peace that surpasses all understanding. He promises peace. He doesn't promise us that, oh, it'll be fine, we'll shake it off. He promises us that we will have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He promises us that He is with us. He promises us that He will give us peace. That no matter what we're going through, that we will be able to have a foundation under our feet that stands firm because of the peace that only He can give. He's been there. He's suffered. He has gone through hardships in life. He's not unable to sympathize with the things that you and I go through in this life. He promises peace in the midst of that. Remember, it was never meant to be like this. It won't always be like this. There is hope for the future where there is no more pain, no more suffering, no more tears. And He promises that He's with us through it all, through the good and through the bad. Resilience helps us to never give up. There's times, like I mentioned earlier, where I'm working on my house, and I hit those roadblocks, and I feel like I'm not going to be able to move forward. There's times where I was able to figure it out eventually, watch YouTube, spend several days thinking about doing it, and then finally trying to do it. There's been times where, like right now, I'm doing a house project in my basement, and to be honest, I got water issues, and yesterday, you know the rain that happened? Like we have some drywall pulled off on the bottom of our walls, and I can see water coming through in certain spots. It's not good. And guess what? It's beyond my purview, but that's not the end of the road. It doesn't mean that my house is doomed. What it means is I'm going to have to call in a professional. I'm going to have other people help me. And you know what? In our faith, and when we meet obstacles, sometimes we got to pull in our community. We got to have the people around us that care about us, that can lock arms with us, that can encourage us, that can help us to build our faith and build up that resistance so that when hard things happen, we can bounce back. We have the ability to bounce back from our own failures. We have the ability to bounce back from the failures of those around us that affect us. We have the ability to bounce back from the obstacles that show up in our path. And I want you to be able to have that. I want you to be able to have a resistance and a resilience that helps you never give up. And so, if you find yourself facing setbacks in life, ask yourself these questions, okay? One, what's happening? You got to step back, get some perspective. What's happening in my life? Where am I meeting? What are the things that are in my control, and what are the things that are not? What's happening? You got to see a full picture of the situation in order to diagnose some of those things. Number two, what is true no matter what? Okay? What is true no matter what? What's true is that God's with me. What's true is this is not forever. What's true is no matter what may come, this is not the end of the road. What's true is you don't have to face it alone. What's true is that while you might not be in control of a lot of the aspects of your situation, God is in control. And what is true is that God works all things for good. What is true is God can take any circumstances and make it something powerful if you let Him. What is true is what will help you get through. So, what is true no matter what and what's happening in your life? And number three, what can I do? If there are certain aspects of all our situations that are setbacks, there's aspects that we can't control, then what aspects can you control? What can you do? What can you pray about? What can you do relationally in the situation? What can you do in order to bring it before God? What can you do? What tools has God given you to help you overcome that situation? That might be different for each of us. It might be the same in a lot of different areas. Maybe use your small group, use your community to help you figure out those answers. Because while there's often things that we can't control, there are things that we can. So what can you do? Remember, resilience will help you to never give up. And that's what I want you to be able to have in your own life and in your own faith. So, as you get ready to go to your small groups, what's one thing that you're going through that is building resilience in your life? What's one thing that you're going through that is building resistance and resilience for you? Let me pray. You guys will go to your small groups.